blows, oh, but I know they ain't gonna knock me down. I'm a force to be reckoned with, and there ain't gonna be no little me again.
There we go, boys and girls. Welcome to the second episode of Toby's Talkinggrounds. This time focusing, as you can see with my two guests here, on the Asian scene. I got Joel, Sophie here, and I got Paper Thin. And well, we got the current subject being introductions, so we might as well start off right here. Joel, you're on my left. I guess that's over there. How are you doing, buddy?
Doing well. How are you? Hi, Toby. It's good to see you here.
Yeah, same. And how? We're in the introduction phase, so we'll get over to you, Paper, in just a moment. I can see you're anxious to get talking over there, Joel. Just tell us a bit about yourself.
Okay, so I started out as a League of Legends translator for the LCK program here in Korea, and I did transition over to being a commentator a year after I made my debut. So I worked on various titles, and the latest one I'm working on is Pubg, obviously, and got to travel to many places doing Pubg on the PC version and the Pubg mobile version as well for Tencent. So pretty heavily involved in this Asian scene, especially the Korean scene that's involved. And we got Paper Thin, who's also been my partner for many of these events that I've been doing. So
there you go.
It's good to have him here with me.
I got the two partners in crime joining in on the podcast today. That's amazing. And we had a little sound in the background. And then before the show here, Paper, you told me that I'm kind of interrupting you in a big holiday season in Korea. Is that true? Or no?
Oh, yeah, asking me?
Yeah.
So lunar Thanksgiving here in Korea. So it's from about 2 days ago up to tomorrow. It's gonna be a couple of days where families get together and just be very thankful about the things throughout the year, and it's basically a big family reunion right around this time of year, and we're having it right now. And I'm in the middle of the countryside right now. This is why I have to use my own independent Wi-Fi just to get connection. And
there you go.
But yeah, I'm here just doing my stuff right now.
So I could not have picked a worse time to ask you to take out time to do this. With that though, Paper, you how are you doing, buddy? How are you doing?
I'm great, man.
Tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm a caster here in Korea these days. I originally moved to Korea not necessarily to be a caster, but it just kind of ended up happening. I used to be a competitive Halo player, just always loved esports and that kind of thing. So Korea was kind of a natural fit in many ways in that regard. And I just loved Pubg. I played so much Pubg. And then there was a need for some Pubg casters here. And some of my friends hooked me up with a tryout. I auditioned. I got the job.
There you go.
And so I've been doing Pubg here for, just over 6 months now. And I've done some Pubg Mobile, some other games as well. I've worked with Joel and many other casters here in Korea, and it's fantastic.
That's cool. It's not often. I mean, last week we had Voxic on, and he is one of the, if not the only, player that made it kind of as an NA player moving over to EU to play. I mean, he lives in the States, but he plays in the EU scene, so it's kind of cool to see that that the Americans, they spread over on the Asian scene as well. That's kind of cool. It's not something you hear about too often.
Hey, they're dominating all over the world, man.
There you go. Exactly. No, but that was introduction, I guess. I mean, if you guys in the chat have questions, you can of course ask both the guys. I'm sure we'll try and answer them as best as we can. And also, for those of you guys sitting out there watching right now, we will be doing a Q&A, short one, after we're done with all the main topics here. So if you have any questions you really want to ask either Joel or Paper, just save them for that, and then we'll fire them off. With that, though, that was introductions. Jumping off to the first actual topic, and I can see this is completely offline. There you go. Asia Post PGI. And we kind of, this is a big one. I know this is a big one, but me and Paper, we kind of talked a little bit about it prior to this. And this, for me at least, is mainly evolving. At least coming into PGI, a lot of people were, EU are so dominant. They're the biggest, they're the best, and they're going to stomp everything. And then PGI happens, and all of a sudden, holy cow, who are these Asian guys? And then how did that kind of impact how the Asian scene has gone since then, Joel?
I mean, it's really true that the expectations were quite low for the Asian scene, mostly because we had uh, less major tournaments internationally. Before PGI, we kind of named the Star Ladder event, which I was casting for, and also right around the same time there was a IM Katowice, and also along with PGL in Bucharest that was happening, and we had some Korean representatives goes there, and hopefully wanting to try to get some good results, but it never really became anything of a noteworthy result from any of those events where the Asian scene seemingly looking better than any other regions out there comparing to NA and EU. But PGI was the first one, yeah, where Genji Gold, specifically a team that came in with high expectations from the domestic perspective, and where we thought that this team was a legit team that would do well, even if they do go abroad to represent Korea internationally. And they did, TPP winning that out, and also the event match with the charity event that they won that out as well as first place. And of course, the biggest surprise for me was actually OMG, which I knew they were a top 5 team in China at the time when they went to PGI and did their own thing, but I didn't expect that they were gonna win the FPP over the likes of Team Liquid and other guys as well. So that was a big surprise for me. I think a bigger surprise for the rest of the world, but I hope this is a good step line where people will start to pay more attention to the Asian scene we have right in PUBG.
For sure. And also, I mean, the paper, have you noticed any, I mean, after PGI, well, one thing is that Asia came out and won it, but have you noticed any, and I guess the viewership is one thing, of course, but have you noticed any increase in what can you say, like, interest in the game? Like, has it grown because of PGI, or was it just meant to happen at some point, kind of?
No, I think you could maybe make the argument that the game grew in China a little bit because PGI, because G, but I think here in Korea the game was already wildly successful and popular and will continue to be that way. Just because part of it is definitely because it is run by a Korean company right now, right? PGI Corp, which was formerly Bluehole, is a Korean company, so there's a lot of kind of pride in that as well.
Yeah.
But I think going into PGI, there wasn't a lot of expectations for Korea or Asia in general. Maybe like Joel was saying, people thought, okay, maybe Genji Gold can really put on a show here. And I actually told Joel this. He may or may not remember. I said Genji Gold's the best TPP team in the world. Mark my words. But because here's the thing. Actually, people don't realize. Like Joel made a great point talking about all these events that the Koreans had been at and hadn't done well. IEM, Katowice, PGL, all these different events, and that was before the Korean leagues really started, before we had the APL, the PSS, and the PWM, the 3 Korean leagues that led up to PGI. And of course, the top 2 teams, Genji, Gold, and Black, out of those tournaments ended up going. All those international events were really before those got rolling. And what happened was the Koreans were already basically playing half TPP, half FPP, and they were also playing half Miramar, half Erangel, depending on the league. And so they had more experience on Miramar, for example, than almost any other teams in the world, especially Korea, because we had been doing Miramar a lot. And that's why, for example, Genji Gold got their one FPP chicken dinner on Miramar. Part of that was because they had played that map and they knew it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I think I was not super shocked that they won TPP. I kind of expected it. I was very shocked that OMG won the FPP tournament. That did shock me.
Yeah, I think it shocked a lot of people. So I love that we're getting the full house tour with Joel over here on the on the side.
I had to charge over my phone. It was on.
No worries, man. No worries. No, but off of that, I mean, one thing is that, of course, it was great exposure for the Asian scene that they came out competing against the best of the best and able to pull off a win. That's one thing. But also, to me, I mean, things happened afterwards. You talked about we didn't have the big leagues. Now we have Korea League and all the ones you talked about. But there were some roster changes to some of the teams where I thought, these guys, they came out on top. And now, I believe Genji, they went from Black and Gold to Genji esports team, right? Joe?
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened. Yeah. We're going with after PGI. I think this happened in Europe and NA as well. As I was kind of watching closely, we had this thing called Roster Royale that was happening all over the world. And it was happening to Korea just the same. And a lot of teams getting ready for the second rendition of the domestic league, which was going to be PUBG Korea League Season 2. That's about to begin in October 1st, by the way. So
that's only a week from now. Yeah.
It
Soon.
really is. We're very
getting
soon
going.
gonna start casting again, so be watching out for that. But yeah, they all knew that date was gonna come sooner or later, and they want to have the best team possible to compete. So rather than having two separate kind of look at what their team could really make, they just want to make one good team that could perform the very best they can. So in addition to Genji, you're gonna see a lot of brand new teams that you probably haven't seen before. The only introduction we got to them briefly was when OGN did the super match event where we had the all FPP event prior to that PGI that happened just a few weeks after that, and that's the first time we got to see a brand new set of teams, and you'll probably expect just a brand new set of teams coming in on October 1st when we do begin PKL Season 2.
Well, that's gonna be interesting, and also we can we're kind of dipping into the next subject, but I just want to finish off here on the whole post PGI thing and how like the Asian scene really sort of boomed in and just swept the whole event pretty much. How has this, I mean, I'm gonna ask you, Clint and Paper, how has this impacted the Asian scene today? Have they, I mean, one thing is that we have the whole 16 team, 20 team discussion on and off, but have Asian teams started looking more into European like tournaments? We're looking at play styles and all those type of things. Are they strictly saying we have our Asian thing going on here and we'll play the Western teams when we meet them?
Yeah, I think they've definitely been watching the European teams because now we are going to all FPP here in Korea. PKL will be all FPP from now on, and it'll be 16 teams instead of 20. So I think they watched these tournaments and realized that
you can't see it, but I'm clapping my hands.
They probably felt like that was the more fair method, and you had players like Eska from Genji Gold coming out and saying that FPP is the more fair format, it is the more competitive format. So we should be going forward using that, and that's what we're seeing. And so the PKL I think is going to be much more in line with what Western viewers have come to know and love with competitive PUBG. And I think that's a good change. I'm really excited. I mean, I was never a TPP hater, but I do much prefer FPP.
Yeah, especially from, I mean, I can play TPP as well, but when it comes to competitive play and wanting to see the best from each and every team, to me at least, I mean, it's a personal preference, of course, but it's always been FPP that stuck to my mind, as well as the more competitive one. But with that, going on to the next subject, trying to hold the time here, it's probably not going to work, but we'll do our best anyway. Next subject on the list, Korea League Season 2. I mean, that's a pretty big deal. I feel like, at least from the Western perspective, that's what I'm trying to bring to this discussion. Season 1, it kind of flew over our heads. I mean, there's so much, as you talked about as well, Joel, there's so much going on, Style Ladder, PGL, all those events going on all the time, that there was a time where I personally was casting 5 different leagues every week. And that was around the same time that Korea League Season 1 was. So there was just so much going on in the Western scene that nobody got a chance to pay any attention to what was going on in the Asian scene. So how has things gone, like how has things changed from your Season 1 to now in Season 2? Is there any major changes coming in?
Well, something that really stayed the same was something I want to mention first is this is a league that's directly in connection with PUBG Corp, and they're really trying to take control of how the league is run and the format they're trying to input, and to make sure they get the results they're looking for, and more of the broadcasters are kind of working with in terms of, I'm here with OGN, and Paper's over there, he's with Frika, and we have our 3 different broadcasters that we're working on PUBG Korea League Season 1 before PGI, and that was going to be OGN Spo TV and also Frika TV, and we worked on that for about 5 months combined, because we sometimes correlated and just kind of had the 2 tournaments running at the same time at most of the time. So altogether, it was a lot of games that the players had to play before we got to PGI. So, but for Season 2, though, I think the biggest change that happened is that we had separate league titles for depending on the broadcaster, whether it was the OGN, they're holding their OGN PUBG Survival Series, and we know that Afrika were holding their Afrika PUBG League, which was a kind of acronym as APL and stuff like that. When a little bit more parallel this time around, Season 2 is going to be just called PKL PUBG Korea League and nothing else is going to be a subcategory to that. So
Yeah.
we're going to have basically just an ongoing league, whether we do it in OGN or whether we do it at Africa. It will all be just that one league. That's, once again, I think that's PUBG's kind of way of saying that, they want to take just immediate control of this league and really call it and make it as official as they possibly can. So I think that's my assumption of why they're doing that in the first place. So hopefully leading up to 2019, they're just trying to look towards that angle where the official PUBG leagues will happen in 2019 for many different regions out there, and Korea will definitely be one of those major regions that they'll be focusing on. So I think this is a good kind of a transition point to what we'll eventually get in 2019.
Yeah, for sure. I can only agree with you on that. And we already heard both the rumors and announcements too on PUBG Pro League, which you said yourself will be all over the world and like all different regions. So it's for sure gonna be a thing. But just in case the viewers out here, they don't know, and the guys on YouTube that will be watching this later, can we I just wanted to cut something, because we call it PUBG like Korea League, right? Is it Paper? Is it only Korean teams that can join, or is it for, well, not everyone, but is it also China, Japan, some of the other teams that we've seen do well in the Asian scene that can be in part of it as well?
This season it'll just be Korea teams. There are no. I looked at the rosters. There are no China or Japanese. Now, in the past, in season 1 of the PKL, we did have Japanese and Chinese teams, including OMG and others that played in the PKL. Some in the PSS, some in the APL. Kind of depended. Some of the Japanese teams did play here too. But this season, it will only be Korean teams. There are 32 total teams. They are all Korea. And the way the format will work, I think, is kind of interesting. I think a lot of people might not know this. Is each week is kind of a mini tournament. So we'll do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 6 p.m. Korean Standard Time, starting next week, October 1st. And the first 2 days are just like a mini group stage where the teams just fight. And then Friday is like kind of like a mini final.
Winners match.
And yeah, a winners match. Yeah, thanks, Joel. And so then you in those winners matches is where you accumulate the points to get to the finals, which will be on December 1st.
That's interesting, because I mean I heard some stuff about that, but that's a very maybe not new thinking way, because it has existed in other games for a long time. But for PUBG in particular, what has always been like one series of games per week, and then you have week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up all the way until you have the like combined accumulated points. Boom. Winners or like top teams go to the finals. So this is like, as you said yourself, small finals throughout the entire tournament. And do you think that could, I mean, of course now we haven't seen it yet, but do you think that could be the way of doing it on a global scale, or do you think that it just fits perfectly in with how the Korean scene is done right now, Joel?
I mean, I would have to just say, is this just another experimentation to see how it all goes? I think they're all theorizing at this point and really trying things out before we get to what we want to call the most official, which will probably be around 2019. Where, like I said, it was a transition for what we're trying to get to the bigger kind of picture of things. And I think this event, where I think many people will agree, some of the complaints that came through with previous tournaments was mainly the fact that we didn't have enough games to decide the best teams, yet the best teams were decided and given prizes to them. And we want to play as many games as we can, and to make sure the winning teams were consistent enough that they won out in enough games that, if we do give out the prizes to them, they would totally be deserving of it. So that's kind of the one theory that we're all focusing on. I think PUBG Corp is kind of thinking on the same line. So this is why they're trying to have basically 2 months full of 3-day events each weekend. That's gonna be a lot of games. That's gonna be a lot of PUBG, and we're gonna split that between OG and Africa in terms of broadcast. So you'll see, Paper, you'll see myself, and bi-weekly on those different dates. So all the way through, it's just gonna be a lot of PUBG games, just to determine, to make sure when we get the best Korean teams up there, even in the finals, that we'll have the best teams go to the finals, and even in the finals, we will have enough games to say that this team is the best representation we have in Korea.
But one thing is, now we talk about Korea, but what are the... I'm just trying to represent the European, Western, or NA person that doesn't know anything about what you guys are talking about. What are the I want to say the other teams, but what are like China or Japan? Do they get similar like China League Season 2 kind of things, or is it all Korea and then everybody that wants to play have to go somewhere?
Well, I just read this that Japan is having its own league this year. And China, I'm just going to assume they're going to have their own league. I mean, after winning the FPP competition and that kind of thing, I mean, it'd just be foolish not to, especially with the insane viewership that China had for PGI. I mean, if you looked at the numbers for PGI, like we're talking like 60 million concurrent viewers out of China, and like the total number of viewers was like according to some websites, like 600 million, just absolutely insane. So they have to have their own league, I feel like. And I haven't found any official word on it, and I asked around, but I've heard rumors. I know for sure they're going to do a Japan one, which was a little surprising because we thought maybe, you know, the viewership in Japan wasn't amazing, but it feels like they are willing to kind of keep this going, and they feel like, you know, Japan is kind of a burgeoning PC esports culture now. They're just starting to get more computers because they used to be a very console-heavy region, right? They played a lot of Street Fighter, they played a lot of Tekken, you know, especially fighting games they're very strong in. But we haven't seen them really compete in PC esports, and PUBG is the first kind of, you know, they're kind of putting their foot in the water to test it out.
Yeah, it makes sense. And well, they're doing pretty good at that. And Crest was pretty well represented at PGI, so that's for sure. But do you guys think this is gonna be? Do you think this is the best way to do it, though, in the sense of keeping it national, or like, do you have 16 good enough teams from each region to play for this, or would it be better to just say like 4 teams from each go into a combined Asian league? In that way,
I would perhaps say that this is a kind of the early stage of PUBG still, but after PGI, we haven't had a full single year where we have PUBG Core sponsored actual events happening, right? So starting from January all the way to December this year, I think that will be the first year where they're going to test out multiple things and, you know, hope things go right, that they're ready enough that they can pull out the big guns for 2019. That's what I'm kind of looking at. And from what you were asking about just a domestic or international, what's the difference there? Is I personally think that, you know, you can always bring foreign players in to whatever domestic league that you want to participate in. But if you want to have a Korean league, you got to have Korean teams, and you can have different foreign players in that roster. But mostly, we've seen in different esports in the past, different titles, and Korean teams always stay with Korean teams, and Korean teams always perform with themselves in their respective tournaments domestically only. And then once we find out which teams are the best teams in Korea, then they go out to internationally and they really try to represent Korea in the best of ways. So I don't necessarily think that we always have to have international competitions every day and every week, but I think this format is good, but trying to find the right system as to obviously the right point ranking that's still way up in the air as to what is completely right. It still hasn't been found yet, and kind of little assignments like that, I think that will all add to a higher quality of tournaments I'm sure we'll get in the future.
Yeah, exactly. One thing I like, and I don't know if you guys know about it, is now that you're just touching on points, is we kind of talked about it last week on the podcast as well, about how there's been you can't call it unified before everyone agrees, but a half and half unified point system that at least some of the major Western tournament organizers are going to go with. I know PUBG Online, ESL, GLL, and some of those guys, awesome as well, will jump on the bandwagon there and say, you know what, we've come up with a point system that we, at least for now, with the way that the game is played, with the way the meta is, will fit the best. And as you said yourself, there hasn't been a full year with competition in PUBG yet at a full sponsored level. So of course we're still very much in the should the goal be 3 meters wide or should the goal be 2 meters wide kind of discussion, right? So for me at least, it's just imagine. I mean, if you go watch a soccer game today, a sport. I'm just trying to think of a sport that's been established and hasn't seemingly been changed for a long time, right? If you watch a penalty, you'll always know, okay, now we'll see the camera right behind the guy. Oh, and here we go behind the goalkeeper. Boom, then they shoot the ball. I mean, it's always just, you know exactly what's going to happen, but we're kind of shaping this because this is so new.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's still a lot of debate about where the points, like the heavier part of the point should lie. Should we give a lot of credit to kills just because of the inherent chaotic nature of PUBG, right? Like, let's just be honest, sometimes just weird stuff happens and there's not a lot you can do about it. And that's a big Right. And that's a big argument of why you want to play a lot of games and why, like, actually I love the Korea scene, because even in PKL season 1, where we had 3 different leagues, I mean, these teams were playing a ton of games. So really you did end up getting the top teams coming out of the region. And, you know, that's great why we're doing that again this season. You know, it's fantastic that we're doing that. But on top of that, it's like, well, should points get a lot of kills? Because, you know, it just like you need that necessary skill set of being a good slayer in PUBG on top of being able to rotate properly and do all these other things. Sometimes bad luck just happens, right? Like that's just going to happen. That's any esport, that's any sport. It's not inherent to PUBG, right? That's inherent to anything that's competitive. Yeah. So, you know, we're trying to find the right balance, right? Because you still want to encourage teams to survive and be smart, and teams should and can do well if they don't want to fight a lot, right? But at the same time, like if you're forced into fights and you win, you should be rewarded for it.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Yeah, I guess that was pretty much season 2 of Korea League. Unless if, I mean, to me, all I've seen is that they've announced the league itself, of course, that it's gonna happen, and also heard some rumors and speculations about what you said with like having 3 play days, and then like the mini finals for every week. But is there anything else, Joel, off the top of your head, that's gonna be like something that, I mean, if you're trying to promote watching the Asian scene matches, because that's kind of what the sort of the bridge I'm trying to gap right now. Oh wait, the gap I'm trying to bridge right now. There you go. That's what I'm trying to gap to bridge, just because, to me at least, the way that I see the Western and the Asian scene is that Asian viewers still watch Asian tournaments, and NA, CIS, European viewers will watch the Western tournaments. And with the point system and everything coming closer and closer together, you said it yourself, 16 teams, and the formats are sort of starting to become the same. What can you do to promote, or what would you do to promote for a European viewer to go watch the Asian tournaments?
SK Telecom Team 1.
There you go. That's all you need to hear.
There you go.
SKT.
That's all you need to know.
That's all you need to say.
They're coming, boys.
That's all.
If you've ever watched League, all you need to say.
Faker is jumping over and he's gonna start playing
Hey
PUBG.
man, hey, this is the reason why they're not going to World.
Yeah, man, they're too focused on PUBG now.
They're
Exactly.
tossing everything on PUBG. That's good though. I mean, that's exactly what you want to hear. I mean, you want to hear these things happen. So
honestly, you know, that's not the biggest thing in the world. But all I'm saying is just all together. We do have a growing and a fast-growing, actually, talented players and talented teams that are really trying to compete internationally and literally trying to beat them, not trying to, you know, be in line with them. They're trying to literally be the best teams in the world. And you'll kind of realize that, you know, over the process in time where we first started out in PUBG, not being a huge history here in Korea for FPS titles in the past, obviously we were going to be lackluster, obviously, compared to the European teams especially, and the NA teams even, and not really finding our mark for the first few months of competitive play we saw internationally. And just over a couple of months, we got to PGI, basically a few months back before then, when we competed in Katowice and Star Ladder and also PGL. We were just, you know, mediocre scrubs, to be honest. And coming into PGI just a few months later, we compete as maybe on par with the best teams that was represented out of Europe and North America, and sometimes beating them out from their own leagues. And that's what I'm just trying to get to in terms of the growth speed is just really undeniable for the fact that Korea has always proven that with time that Korea will always become the best, and that's the kind of work ethic that's always proven to be very successful. So I would only assume, you know, by my knowledge of how hard these guys are working to become the best, that you'll eventually see these guys in future international tournaments. Well, they're gonna continue to surprise a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. And just touching on, because that kind of leads into the next topic we have, the whole not wanting to play on pair, but wanting to best them. I mean, you don't want to just be as good as everyone else. You want to be the best. That kind of leads on to the whole EU or Asia compared to EU and NA, in the sense of, I'm just gonna make this a little bigger, compared to the Western scene, how the player mentality is different. And just to sort of start this discussion right after PGI and the Asian teams won. The whole discussion, at least in the Western scene, was, oh, but how can we do this? The Asian teams, they have 10 scrims each day, and they get so many better chances to do this and that. Where when I then asked some of the EU players, and I was like, well, if you had 10 scrims per day, would you want to play? I mean, that would be 10 to 12 hours every day where you sit and scrim. Would you want to do that? Oh, but I also want to see my family. I also want to see my friends. Well, there you have it. I mean, maybe the mentality is just different. But can you elaborate on that? Either, one of you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely there's a big difference with how Asian teams view esports versus EU or NA. They mostly live together. Almost all the teams do live together and practice together. They have their own houses. They're run by the sponsor or a company that they work for. They have somebody who basically gets them food, does everything that they need for them. And you're right, they do play 10 to 12 scrims a day. And, it's these players who do this sacrifice a lot for it. I talked to Grammatic, one of the players for Genji Black in PGI. He ended up retiring after PGI because he was just burnt out. It's a lot of work, right? You're like you said, you're playing a ton of scrims. You have to live in this house. You kind of have this regimented lifestyle, which isn't for everybody. But there are other teams who are willing to make that sacrifice. For example, there's a team here that a lot of people might know of called Team Quadro. Team Quadro has moments of brilliance. They are a very strong team. They have a couple players on that team that are absolutely godlike sometimes. And they are an eclectic group of people. They aren't kids who grew up just playing esports and then just became pro players like a lot of younger people do. They are people who already had professions or already studying like very advanced degrees. Like one of them was in med school. One of them was a professional field hockey player. One of them was a professional model. So this is a team that purely came together for a love of this game and a chance to be the best here in Korea. And they at times showed flashes of being the best. They I think they have the potential, and they're like my dark horse team to watch out for in PKL Season 2. But they live together now, and they play together all day, every day, and now they're going to be in PKL Season 2, and I'm really excited to see them. But in general, it's just kind of part of their culture. Like it's expected that when you do something, you want to be the best no matter what.
And is that?
I want to extend over that. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, continue. Go
ahead.
That culture aspect that paper was trying to get at. I was think for me being a Korean American that was born in Korea, moved over to the States when I was very young and lived there for many years before I returned back to Korea and to kind of experience and kind of compare the two cultures together. One thing I definitely realized just outside the esports aspects that these players, it's a hugely competitive society we have here in Korea, and sometimes it turns to negative connotations of the punishing aspects of being so competitive that you do lose out on kind of the social benefits that maybe the Westerners would definitely like to have if they were living in Korea. And you talk about just being generally accepting of not being perfect, right? And generally being saying that if it's not great, then it's sometimes.
I think you cut out.
For
there you go.
We lost you there for a second.
Am I all right?
Yeah, you were just lagging out a little. I think you're all right now. I'm not sure. There you go. Okay. There you go. You're back.
So, but all I'm saying is, the players here, if they don't do well on something, I've seen Western players from NA and EU from kind of bad results at tournaments, and they were saying, can try better next time, and sorry for our mistakes, we'll do better next time. And the fans are very accepting of that kind of statements, and they do wish them better luck next time, right? And the difference to that is in Korea, they're not really accepting of those things. They're not accepting of minor failures, and they do not just wish them to do better. They really kind of do have a negative connotation on teams that they were rooting for to tell them that you need to be better next time. And there's a kind of a much higher stress to that, and that's something that is a little bit different to Korean culture.
For sure.
Sometimes it can be viewed as negative, but it really does drive a very competitive feel in terms of you do have to get better. It's not about wanting to get better and needing to get better. It just you have to get better. There's no other options of that.
Exactly.
And that's kind of what drives the players to do a lot more and really work hours and hours. I know 14 hours is just a kind of just a yawn in terms of some of the players that are working so hard to just improve their game, and it can really extend over to very much physical fatigue and also mental fatigue as well. But they overcome that because success is the only way out, and that's what they're gonna do. And it's happened and proven itself, and I have all the confidence that's happen again.
Does
Do
that?
you mind if I?
No, it's just
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry.
No,
Do you
go
mind
ahead.
if I add just a little bit more
go
to that?
ahead.
Just a little bit. I think there's Joel is absolutely right, and there's just a little bit more to add to it. There is the infrastructure here in Korea as well that plays into this, right? We have the PC cafe culture and some other things like the amazing internet that's just across the entire country that is stupid fast and just fantastic. So there's an underlying element of the actual like foundation of what Korea is that allows all of this to also be possible. And like if you want to go with your friends to a PC cafe after school, it's really cheap. It's like $1 an hour basically, less than that sometimes. And so like the ability to like make it a social thing in and of itself is there. And then if you want to make it a like a professional thing, like they just go all in.
Yeah, and that's kind of leads into my next question, being one thing is dedication. We touched upon that. Of course, I don't think there's any person in the world in any profession who is trying to be the best, like in the sport per se, that's trying to be the best, that would ever not want to give it all. Because if they don't want to give it all, then they should probably think of something else to do. But I mean, for in the sake of you talked about how the infrastructure in Korea is pretty much based around being able to be the best that you can be. How do you think that I can talk about the Western side of this, but I want to hear about the Asian side, like the whole opportunity. Can any person come in from the street, grind his butt off, and make it to a Korean pro team in an esport? Or is it only the selected few? Like how does that work? Does anyone get a fair chance, or is there too much of a divide between who can make it there and who can't?
No, scouting is very, very common, mainly based on the rank system that the organizations kind of look at, and they look at their VODs and they look at their replays and see exactly what this player can do and can achieve. And and streamers is a big platform for that most recently, because in the recent years we've saw kind of amateur players who do extraordinarily well just by grinding and doing really well for themselves, and organizations pay a lot of attention to that. We know this is happening all over NA and EU as well, where popular streamers just go into professional teams, not as their team streamers, but it's going to be professional players playing for tournaments all over the world. And it's the same for Korea, where the ranked players do get a lot of look at and get a lot of notice, and they do get personally contacted by an organization to make sure if you are given a lot of choices in terms of where you want to play. And it is a very common culture to have that kind of player management, where human management does happen that way in the teams.
So for just to make like a hypothesis or whatever we say, for a scout from our team trying to see if they can find their perfect fourth member or whoever they may be needing, how do you set yourself up the best way? I know there are scrims all the time in the Korean scene, but do they all go together and sort of figure out, okay, we're scrimming today, there's going to be these 16 teams playing? How do you become part of that from going with just playing publicly with friends?
Well, I think you start out by playing solo and just, especially PUBG, just being very good, just being very skilled mechanically. Then later on, you find maybe a squad to attach yourself to, and you build your squad rank. You do very well in that kind of thing, and you build your reputation as a team player or whatever you want to say. And then, eventually, what'll start happening is a lot of these teams have open competitions. SKT1 had an open scrim to get all their new players for this new team that formed. So it's a team full of relative unknowns in terms of the PUBG esports scene here in Korea. These are players who haven't really played in the very top levels of PUBG in Korea. Now, some of them have experience in other places, of course, but it's a very new team, so it'll be interesting to see how they gel together. And there is the open bracket system here in Korea. So if you put a team together, you just feel like you guys are good, you can get into the PKL just on being an open bracket team. Yeah, there's open qualifiers. Exactly. So there's a couple teams. One of the teams will be familiar to people who watched PKL Season 1 called Asterisk, who did make it through. in the open qualifiers. They were not extended an invitation based on their performance in the PKL season 1, but they made it through in the open qualifiers for season 2. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And I think like the cool thing about Korea is if you want to be a pro gamer, you can just go to the PC cafes every day. It's not that expensive to do. You know, you could pay, if you want to be there 12 hours, it costs you about $12, right? So you just need to do some chores a little bit, save up a little cash or something, and you have the ability to play an insane amount of video games if you really are passionate about it and want to do it and have the ability to try to set yourself up for that kind of future.
And is the quality of the setups they have at the places, are they capable of, I mean, yeah, it's just top notch.
The best. GTX 1080, yeah.
I mean, anything you find at maybe 80% of North American computers, it's probably beats that by a mile. So
yeah, that's what I want to hear. That's how it's
I mean,
supposed to be
Paper,
all
can
over.
agree with you on that one.
Yeah, they're top of the line. I go to the PC cafes from time to time, and the computers are all, you know, GTX 1080 Ti's, you know, top of the line i7s, just very, very, very good computers that run PUBG flawlessly.
So that's talking about new people wanting to come into the scene and wanting to try and find, because in Europe, at least my feeling is that it's very, very much network based. Like you will, there are scrim discords where the players and different teams will arrange scrims and practices. For those of you guys sitting out here not knowing what a scrim is, that's, well, pretty much when 16 teams go together and figure out, hey, we want to play, let's go. And probably a little more coordinated than that, but that's pretty much how it works here. And the only way to get on those discords is knowing a guy who knows a guy. So you sort of need to first make a name for yourself, which can be tough if you're not a person that knows a guy. I mean, yeah.
The infrastructure is definitely really nice here, and we talked about just with that previous question you had earlier about how Korean teams do so well here. But infrastructure is such an, I think, a very important asset where you're trying to have the best players and best people that you have in your country to represent your country, eventually becoming a professional player in a professional team, just representing worldwide, just doing the best you can. And you gotta be able to acquire and find these very talented players to get there, and that's all really dependent on infrastructure, in my opinion. And Koreans do really well with that. It's just been so prevalent in Korea for esports in so many years that it's now just a kind of a, you know, beyond the networking services, that it's just a common thing where if you're talented at a certain video game, you will get noticed. And there's very easy ways to get to professional teams for them to contact you first before you even have to reach out to them. So it's a very nice system that we have here, and this is kind of the reason that even in this very small country that we have in Korea, we're able to get the best of what we have and you know, put that out internationally and find a lot of success.
So with that, I mean, that kind of covers trying to get into becoming a professional in esport, in any esport pretty much, or anything really. But how, I mean, I'm just trying to sort of compare the two. How, for professional players, that we touched upon, the majority of the teams, they live together. They have like a gaming house, so to say, where they have their setups and their beds next to each other, or like different bedrooms next to each other, I guess you can say. But I know for the most part, I think there are two, I mean, with NA and EU combined, I think there are two teams with designating gaming houses doing the same kind of thing where they live together, if even. But the majority of them are young people who live in their respective countries and they play from there. I mean, they have their own apartment, they have rent they need to pay, and that rent is, of course, paid with the salary that they get from playing. But that's more of the what can I don't want to call it adult life, because the other life is like, I mean, you know what I mean though, right? the old school pre gaming house culture life. It's not really gone to that, but it's sort of more the, oh, I also have to cook some dinner, oh, I also have to walk the dog, I don't know, whatever people have for responsibilities. Whereas to I mean, are they more opportuned in Korea than they are in EU in that sense, or is it just because they do it differently and we could also do it if we wanted to?
Well, I think there's like a couple pieces to this puzzle. Like, part of it is the culture. You know, people are used to living in closer, more confined spaces here in Korea, as well as living, like I was telling you earlier, Toby, it's normal for Koreans to live with their parents until they're married.
Mm-hmm.
So it's normal to kind of, be in these family, close, tight-knit households much longer than you're probably used to in NAEU.
Yeah.
Like, once you're 18, you go to university, you're kind of on your own. You get a job, you're on your own, and you just kind of have your own living space in NAEU. And I think part of that is culture, like where possibly, a lot of these NAEU players aren't willing to sacrifice that level of autonomy to, to really succeed and excel at these esports, because they can maybe make pretty good money being a darn good streamer and play at these local tournaments and do very well. Whereas in Korea, like, there is a drive to be the best. And you have to do that by getting in these houses, getting to know your teammates, kind of putting your ego aside and being willing to kind of cohabitate with these other people. Just having this sort of sense of, we're doing this, we're putting everything that it makes us kind of alone or individual aside a little bit to do this thing and to try to be the best.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add to that, Joel?
Yeah, sure. I think another thing that I want to add shortly, that in addition to everything that paper said, it's mostly about the another, once again, going back to the cultural side of what Korean people kind of represent, is that they are less individualistic. They do not believe in doing things on their own, just being very different in their thoughts and their train of actions compared to what everyone else. And in a bad perspective, that can seem very robotic, where everybody kind of looks the same, everybody kind of dresses the same, everybody kind of just acts the same. But we have a lot of trend followers rather than trendsetters here in Korea, and being that lack of individualisticness, if you can say, it's a lot more group oriented. They're willing to unite, they're willing to cooperate with others, and it's more important to benefit the group rather than benefit the individual. Kind of, that's contrary to the culture we have in the West, where NA and you would probably sometimes sacrifice for the entire group for that benefit of that one individual. That's very common in NA and also EU for where I lived in. And Korea, it's very, very different, where you gotta kind of sometimes sacrifice your own benefits in benefit for the entire group. And that's where really, if you're in an esports and a team environment where a whole team has to be basically moving as one, acting as one, to find a lot of success in any sports you do have, any title that we have here in esports, that's where you're going to find a lot of success. You're going to find a lot of benefits for them, because the team is willing to cooperate with each other to kind of sacrifice their own individual egos and to say, whatever makes the team better, we'll do that. And this is exactly why we will get basically very, very fast-growing team synergy and just overall good team chemistry altogether that proves so successful and so helpful in esports.
Does that also go to show when you have roster changes? I mean, one thing is, of course, the fact that it's not just, how you have internet trolls and you can say a billion things in the chat that you would never dare say to a person face to face, right? So does this also sort of impact roster changes? I mean, if you have a guy that's been living under the same roof as these other guys for X amounts of weeks or months, and they've gotten to know each other really well and personally, and then you do roster changes, and for a person that is so dedicated to wanting to be the best at this, then getting kicked out of that house, probably moving back to his or her parents, and then having to sort of get back up on the horse and try to find a new team, or how do players sort of come back from that in the Asian scene compared to you?
I think that's a great question, Toby, and you actually are asking kind of what I was starting to think about from like a psychological aspect of what it means to be a esports professional, especially in PUBG, right? I think there's something to be said about living with the same team, working with the same team, because obviously playing with them and scrimming with them and doing those kind of things is going to build a lot of chemistry in and of itself. But living with them and really interacting with them actually adds a whole nother psychology, because it's somebody you're interacting with face to face. You kind of have to have a certain level of, just kindness to each other, right? You can't really just be jerks to each other, else the whole thing's just going to fall apart, right? There's a courtesy aspect to it. And on top of that, just being around the same people kind of over and over again gives you kind of a feel for their general personality, and that bleeds into their gameplay style and stuff like that. And that's really important in PUBG, right? Because it's four of you trying to work together as this unit to try to get things done. And you have to kind of predict and understand what your teammates want to do. Yeah, obviously you're talking to each other and that kind of thing. So I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
And then, so let's tack on to what you were saying. That's like the basis of what your question was, right? Your question is, where do these players go after they change teams? How does that affect them? And I think we've seen, at least here in Korea, after we saw the OSS, the OGN, special tournament they had, where we got to finally see these new teams after the Korean roster royale, that the teams that we thought might be really, really strong because they had some of the best individually skilled players from Korea put onto them, and especially the OP gaming teams, they did okay, but they weren't the best. And we saw a team like OGN Entis Force, which is a team that has been together for a long time now. They did pick up one new player in season 1 of PKL, this player named Kale, who proved to be a hugely valuable addition to them and a big part of why they won the APL season 2. And they almost qualified for PGI based on that. They were very, very close. But they did very well. They were third. Yeah, they were third. Yeah, right behind the 2 Gen G teams. And so these teams that have played together and lived together for a while, I think are going to have a very strong advantage, because it's difficult to gel with these other teammates, because you're going to have an idea. Like, for example, you get a knock on one player that's maybe 50 meters away from you behind a rock, and you think the best play is to move up on that player to prevent the other team from getting the resurrection on that player, right? But your teammate thinks that the better idea is to wait back and watch their team try to resurrect that player. Like, they have to come from different angles to help them, so you can cover those angles and you feel more confident in taking out the rescuers, or whatever you want to call them. And maybe you have some utility like grenades or Molotovs or whatever to help prevent that as well, but your teammate doesn't really understand your general play style. So that actually creates a lot of separation in how you're thinking, and then your team play isn't as strong.
And that's the thing, right? Synergy. I mean, that's what it all comes down to. Rather work well with not mediocre players, because you want to, of course, be on top. But you see it time and time again, especially in like the highly competitive scene, that the better the synergy is, the better the understanding of how your communication is, and you can just see it. I mean, you don't even have to watch the stream. You just watch the map stream. Just watch the map, and you can see as soon as a decision is made, you can just see everyone is just boom committing to that one decision. And 9 out of 10 times that pays off. I mean, it's always how it is. If you spend too much time discussing what you want to do and whatnot, then things will fall apart. But yeah, I think that kind of sums up the whole discussion on how the EU scene is different from the NA scene, and it all comes down to, well, as you said in the beginning, Joel, it all comes down to, first of all, the infrastructure of how the respective countries support esports, and also like your opportunity as an individual. Do you want to fully commit to, I mean, like just what you come from, right? If you're used to the close quarters living spaces that you do in Korea, and not in the same way that you do in most places in Europe, then how will that sort of tag on in your later life coming into these scenes?
For sure, yeah. I think something that we want to kind of close on this topic is that you have to be willing. You have to be willing to sacrifice part of your identity, part of your current career, or whatever you're doing at this current moment. If you want to pursue to become a professional gamer, you have to have the mentality that you're not really playing by yourself, unless you're playing, some of these FGC titles over at EVO. If you're playing fighting games, obviously you can play by yourself. It's okay to do that, but most major esports nowadays are team oriented, and the team always comes first. You have to always say that you have individually the best talent out of anybody else in your region. You can have that title to yourself, but it means nothing if you can't cooperate with the rest of your 3 members that you have in your squad. And it's really a sacrifice, because there's a lot of pride and a lot of in one way, there's a lot of arrogance, because you're so respected individually for what you're able to do, on streams, on replays, and some of the things that people have witnessed you for. And sometimes you have to sacrifice that. You have to just willing to give that up, because even if you're the best player individually, if you just can't cooperate, you will never be the best team. You'll never win tournaments. And I think the best teams that even we saw Europe and NA. Talk about Team Liquid recently doing extremely well. These guys, I've seen these guys, all 4 guys, talk to them when I was at Stala in Kiev and talk to all 4 of them. And these guys are all about getting the win. And obviously we had the wonderful leadership of Scoom doing so well to lead his team and to get his team on the right mentality. And it was the other 3 players. If they didn't follow up with that, if they didn't cooperate and agree with what Scoom kind of had in line, they wouldn't have found the success, even if they were the most talented individuals that we had in the West. So I think that's kind of the one thing I want to say to all the kind of the Western viewers and then Western players, if any of them are watching at this point, that team comes first. I think that's the best way you will find immediate success, and that's something that you really should be striving for as a team unit. That it's not an individual game. You have to make sure that the team moves as one, thinks as one, and acts as one. And I think that will be always the best remedy for things that aren't working out so out there. If you have individual talents and you can get that team synergy going, you're gonna find.
Exactly, and it's not only in game. I mean, it's not, especially if you're living together. I mean, it's not only sitting in front of each your computer doing those strategies. It's in life, as you said yourself. Team comes first. That's also missing out on family birthdays. It's also not going with your parents on vacation next week because you have a tournament coming up. I mean, it's those kind of sacrifices you gotta make if you want to be the best of the best. And some people, they'll not respect it, but some people will live up to it, and some people won't. And well, more often than not, you'll see that there's peoples that dare sacrifice those things that will come out on the top. But with that, I think we're kind of reaching a point at which we've talked for 56 minutes, I think.
Wow.
Wow.
This is
fast.
Right? Yeah, I'm telling you, it goes fast. Now I mean the whole Asia special. It sounds kind of made up. And when I put it up that way, but the reason I called this podcast that is because I want to, like, if you guys would want to as well, we haven't really talked about this, but want to come back to this throughout the seasons to come and whatnot, like get more info on the state of Asia. How is it going over there in the other side of the world? I mean, that could be nice. So hopefully we'll get back to that at some point. But now, actually, for you viewers that are sitting out there watching, we are so fortunate to have Joel and Clint here with us. Not every day you get to talk to the Asian experts. So if you have any questions in the chat, do toss them up, and I'll send them across the big wide internet, and we'll see what answers we come up with. So if you have any questions, fire away, and then just while they're thinking about what they want to ask, I'll just ask you guys real quick. For a player, and this is kind of different now because I wrote this one before the news was made that the Pro League will only be with teams that are living in the same regions. For example, EU players wanting to play NA, that's not gonna be a thing unless if they actually move their physical
bodies.
And one thing is they live there, but they cannot just live there on a visa. They have to be residents of the country. Do you think, because you talked about it as well, Koreans play with Koreans, Chinese play with Chinese, Japanese play with Japanese. Do you think you're going to see Asian mixed teams at some point?
No.
Nope.
Language barrier or mentality, or what is that because of?
China, maybe. China.
Maybe China will drag in some players, but it's a language barrier for sure. And I think especially between Korea and China, they're very, very competitive. And like, I think there's almost a level of like, we don't like China winning FPP, Korea, they have their own league, and it's if you watch the PKL, it is just almost as good as any other major PUBG, esport. So I think like there's this kind of level of like, well, we have the right players, we have the right language, like we don't really need to cross-pollinate.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
makes sense. Okay, so that was just to get things started. We got a question here from Forrester. He says, I was surprised Myth, for example, seemed to be scared of competing against the EU and NA teams. How is the mindset in the Korean teams in regards to multinational teams? Does that make sense?
I think they for Koreans, I think it's a little bit different to Thailand, where Myth comes from. you are looking at a region which is Thailand at this, first part of that question, where it's a region that really hasn't found incredible amount of success in previous esports titles in the past.
Mm.
So it makes sense that they don't have that kind of dominating mindset that if we work hard enough, that we're able to win against even the best
The
teams around
best,
any
yeah.
parts of the region of the world. But I think it's a little different for Korea, at least. I would say that the Korean teams have already witnessed that they can indeed become the best teams in the world for a variety of esports. And you talk about League of Legends already being there. StarCraft, we already know, is still an thing, and Overwatch is, more and more we go, we know that Koreans are always at the center of attention for that. So people believe that even within the players, they believe that with time, with the work ethic they're putting in, that there will always come a time where they don't necessarily need to be afraid of any teams, whether it be, the best teams around the West. Talk about Team Liquid I was mentioning earlier. FaZe Clan's always there, and these guys look like the scary monsters that they are, but with time, there will come a time where the Koreans will say that, rather FaZe Clan and Team Liquid maybe should be afraid of us, and that statement seems very, very far fetched right now, but sooner or later, I think that time will.
Yeah, I mean that's true. The more when you only have one team that sits on the top and looks down like a huge giant, everyone's gonna be like, ah. I mean, it's gonna be the 2-2 split, right? Because the one half is going to be, oh no, the giant, we have to run away. The other half is gonna be, we want to take down the giant. Like, we want to be the ones to get it down. So with the more and more people up there, with everything kind of evening out, it's gonna be more of a thinking on what are your. Like, it's gonna be more of taking pride in what you're capable of doing, instead of trying to react to how you think they're gonna do things. And that's where we also see so many people say, oh, when you come to LAN events for the first and second time, you're gonna have the LAN jitters, like you're gonna be extra nervous because now things are different. Some of the teams you see that has never played LAN before, they will come in and they'll be like, well, we're just going to play like we always do. And then they're going to screw over people because everybody's going to be like, oh, these guys, they're the newcomers. We can take them out easily. And they go out and they take you. I mean, we see that from time to time. But with that, question number 2, Patrick, he has 2 questions. Let's start with the first one. Guys, who's your favorites and dark horses to win PKL? Let's you get to pick one each. You get to pick one favorite and you get to pick one dark horse. Let's start with Joel. Wait, give us your favorite. Who is gonna win PKL season 2? Go. If you're wrong, then you have to.
Let's go. Hey, that's all it is. That's all I need to say. I'm a OGN owned caster, but I'm just kidding. I'm a freelance, but I do work most of my events at OGN, and with all that information aside, OGN Entus Force is incredibly good right now.
Good.
I think some of the teams that don't know these players will start to get surprised. And if these young players can find a lot of consistency and find good individual leadership from one of those 4 players that will do primary of the shot calling, I think they can do well and does have a chance to win. Perhaps PKL season 2 is a possibility. But dark horse, Kongdoreta. I think this team is something that's been unspoken of in terms of Evermore coming back to the scene and really showing
Mr.
that
Healer
his
guy.
leadership. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He's coming from Gamescom 2017, man, and he's back and he's ready to play. And we saw him at OGN Super Match that happened just about a month back, and they look fantastic. And some people don't believe in them anymore because Evermore focused many months, especially in PUBG Korea League Season 1, focusing on education and other matters that wasn't really related to PUBG. So just kind of taking months off, literally. And we thought that his performance would go down, and with that, his team's performance going down as well. But he looked just as good. His team looked just as aggressive as the team's style that I've always preferred from them. So a dark horse. Don't know if they would do well, but I think Kongdoreta does still has a good chance.
For sure. What about you, Paper? Who's gonna win?
I mean, OGN Entus Force was definitely up there on teams that I thought could do well. I think the Genji roster is still quite strong. I think one of the OP gaming teams is going to win. I think
tough one.
I think Rangers are going to win, not Hunters.
Oh,
I actually have my doubts about Sexy Pig. He used to be one of my favorite players, but recently I think his attitude has gotten quite sour.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard this from unnamed sources that he's kind of toxic. And so I'm not, and I'm not the biggest fan of Sexy Pig anymore. And even though he is quite a skilled player, I think he isn't going to be as strong for the Hunters. And, you know, I think he had a golden opportunity with Black, and it kind of got squandered as the seasons went on.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go with the OP Gaming Rangers, not just because Eska's on there, who is obviously a god, but they're just a very stacked roster with, I think, strong, you know, talented, teamwork-oriented players. I think for a dark horse, I already said it, Team Quadro.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a team that is full of very hungry players, very, like, good dudes who just want to win, who sacrificed really lucrative careers. Like, one of them was in med school, one of them was offered a position at the business that his father is the CEO of. Another one, like I said, was a very famous model here, and another one was a field hockey player, and they all threw that away to play PUBG and form this team, and they're sticking together. They were together all throughout season 1, and they'll be back for season 2. Really watch out for Quadro, Under, and Wookie. These two players are absolutely insane. Under is capable of absolutely being one of the top players. Under is unbelievable. Wookie is very good as well. And wait. Okay, so Patrick's telling me that Quadro is a new roster. Since when, Patrick? How do you know these things? How does Patrick know these things? Patrick, you don't even live here, man.
He's
like,
fast, man. He's
I
fast.
thought well, it's still Under and Wookie are still on Quadro, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't hear any news of any like major roster changes. I could be wrong.
Either way, we'll
Under's on DPG AIM? What?
a lot of things is happening right now.
Oh
we're getting live news on the channel. That's good.
Why is this? There's like no way to keep track of this stuff. I swear to God. Like, I'm like going to the website.
It's the holidays, man. All the
It's holidays.
Basically abandoned since a couple of days ago. I think we're gonna get all the information starting in about 2 days. All our producers will send us emails. So that's when we know. There's not in Quadro anymore.
Yeah, DPG AIM is my pick then, because I love Under. I think he's like one of the best. One of the best in Korea. There you go.
So I mean, one more question there. How do you what do you think of the changes up to the blue zone in for PKL? If you have any comments on that.
I don't care.
I don't think it matters that much.
No.
Yeah.
I don't think it makes that big of a difference.
It doesn't take too much time for players to understand, you know, how the changes affect their play style. It won't be that long where, you know, players will say, you know, it's not a big deal. They'll take care of it, and they'll move along with how the new, you know, plays on time zones have been played out. They'll know exactly what to do with that, and you'll get, you know, the players to play as if nothing has changed. And you know, I don't think that's the biggest deals.
Makes sense. Then we get the ending life. Do you think there will be a Faker or SKT T1 in PUBG? Why and why not? Like, will we have this one guy who just outshines everything, or is it too hard to say? I mean, one thing is League, when you have two teams playing against each other, like you have in Counter-Strike. Can you do the same thing? Can you have like that one guy that just stands out like a colossal in a 64-man game?
I mean, we kind of have that in Korea with Eska. But he was popular from other FPS already. He had already played a lot of other esports, so he's kind of you know, an established commodity. I think in terms of like somebody who might surprise you and become that kind of player, I mean, I could see Geekin doing it. He's unreal. Shadow, yeah. I mean, I thought maybe Sexy Pig was going to be it, but I don't know.
But is it the one player, though? As we talked about earlier, without team synergy, you don't have it, right? Is it the one player? One thing is that he might be the one to get the kills, or he might be the one to make the hero 1v3, whatever play. But can you really, in a game like PUBG, throw it all onto one guy being the lord of the game, or is it his team that sets him up to be as good as he is?
I think we can always have one FaZe Clan and one Team Liquid of a specific era.
Yeah, it's more of a team thing, right?
It is a team thing. I think there will be dominating teams over, you know, periods of months, but never like SK Telecom, where they have dominated for 3 years straight, and for League of Legends. And I don't think, with how fast the changes are coming through from PUBG Corp, that meta changes are always happening, and the teams are always adjusting, adapting, and throughout that process, there's teams that flourish, and there's teams that find it difficult to find their own game, and
Sure.
by the time they found it, then the meta changes again. And I think it's going to be a thing where we have kind of months and months of different teams dominating throughout. We saw Genji Gold being that team for majority of PKL season 1, and they will definitely not be that team in PKL season 2 coming into this next season. They will not be the dominating team like they were in the previous season. So
Yeah.
I expect that teams can dominate months and months and by, but that's going to be the I think the maximum period we'll ever get any team to be basically called basically the untouchable best team in Korea.
So
Yeah, I'm not willing to discount the fact that there could be a player who comes out and just absolutely smashes. I mean, it is a team-based game, and there is a lot of emphasis on teamwork. So it kind of makes it weird because on the one hand, you think about who is the best play caller, right? Like who is actually making the best shot calls, who is making the best decisions for their team, and that's something that's really hard to quantify, right? There's no stats that really give you that other than maybe your overall team ranking. Like I honestly, like right now, I think Simpson is the best play caller in Korea for Gen G, but that may or may not be true. I don't know. That's just based on what I've seen. It's really hard for me to like back that up with stats, for example, but I'm not discounting the fact that there could be a player who comes into the scene and absolutely just shreks everybody and is just so good. Like they're like a Michael Jordan or whatever, like, because basketball is a team sport, but sometimes players just take over and can just, hard carry.
And even even PUBG, it's really, really easy to see who's the one that, I don't want to say carries the heavy load, but it's very easy sometimes to see who is the one that, makes the calls. I mean, not just makes the calls, because there will always be an IGL on a team, but sometimes you have like the dad and the kids. I mean, that's just that you see that time and time again on teams, and it shines through. So I agree with you in that stats might not show it, but when you watch the games and whatnot, it's very easy to see who's the backbone for a certain team.
But you know what I would like to say is that I think with the current state of PUBG, I think it's very difficult to find one player who can incredibly carry to literally get squad wipes every time in every game, and that's why I just kind of wish that PUBG would someday would get to a state where it allows individual players to really outshine over the tournament, and you'll get a player that you can expect great things from, and kind of disregarding the RNGs, disregarding the other players and teams that will come at different angles. This player that you expect great things from will be able to produce every single time, and I think that will kind of increase the fan interaction that we'll eventually get with that single player. So I hope that the game itself, PUBG, will eventually change to that kind of game where it allows more of that. But I think the current state is just kind of difficult to see that happening.
For sure. And just one last thing before we round up everything here. Just a question that I have off my top of my head. You kind of touched upon it too, Joel. The whole thing that a lot of the esports faces that you have in Asia come from streaming, or some of them at least. Like they've built up their own sort of community, and then they've brought that into, like they've grinded their way through that to be as good as they are, and then they've joined their respective esports teams. But how does that work when they've joined the teams? Now we're talking about how they have scrims X amount of hours every day. How do you, as a person who grew a community by streaming every day, or often at least I would assume, how do you do that when you have to play with your team for 10 to 11 hours every day? Like, how do you maintain that if the only way that they can see you is on tournaments? Are they streaming the scrims too?
Me?
No, both of you. They do
that.
Oh, they stream
the
scrims.
Okay.
I wasn't aware of that actually.
I mean, Yunroot, that's kind of the first person that comes to mind. He was the first generation PUBG player here in Korea, and he was the original face of Genji Black when they first acquired him and his team. And basically, when he first got on Genji, he basically streamed every day, and half of its contents were really team-based games with him and Esther, Sexy Pig at the time, and Ju-won being there as well, and he literally streamed those games live with solo queue practices. He streamed his own squad matches with his Genji teammates, and also we got to see him doing personal scrims and all the things that were involved in tournaments where he was allowed to stream that onto here, and he just filled hours and hours of his content using that. So yeah, no problem with that. Just the fans understand that he's in a professional team now, that he's got to be dedicated and really be willing to contribute to that. So they definitely understand when basically half of his content, or sometimes more, it's not what it used to be, and it's just basically all competitive based.
So this kind of begs another question that I want to throw at you guys before we round off things. At least for the EU scene, I know for some of the NAs, the American scrims are being streamed as well. But I think that the European scene, and I'm probably gonna hear for this, but I think one of the main reasons why they are not streaming the scrims in Europe is because, well, scrims are made for trying out new things. That's one thing. It's made for testing out new players to a team, especially here with Roster Royale, and there will be players on like the tryouts that aren't official, so you cannot, like, if you go and show, oh look, this guy is suddenly scrimming with this team for 2 weeks in a row, I wonder if he's gonna join the team. You can't really go out and show that until it's actually official. So I mean, there are a lot of aspects that are made so that they don't want to have them streamed, which I guess makes sense. But do Koreans then, since they have that accessible, like you can just go in and watch the replays of the streams, right? Is that a tool that coaches and analysts use to prepare for teams? Like if you're going to see, oh, how did they play yesterday for 10 hours? Is that something they do?
I mean, when in recent times, when I've watched Korean scrims, because I watch like Dingception, Yunru, a couple other players on their scrims, they aren't playing with their normal rosters. They're playing with just kind of other pros. Like they kind of mix it up and have fun, and it's more for like the streaming aspect. These days when they do real scrims, sometimes they're streamed, but not often. More often than not now, this is all done out of the public sphere. It's done privately. We don't see it as much these days. In the beginning, Joel is right. It was much more popular to see the bigger teams do it. These days, it's been clamped down on. So like I was watching like Ju-won stream, and he was playing with I can't remember, some members. He was and he was playing with some people, and I'm like, is Ju-won gonna be on like a new team? Like wow. But then he ended up going to DPG AIM with Quadro, and actually I saw him playing with Quadro too, and I thought, oh, this is weird. But now it kind of makes sense. But I think if I'm running a professional team, it'd be in Korea or anywhere, I don't want the majority of my scrims on the public sphere. I want it private.
Yeah, exactly, because you want to be able to test out things, right? And how does it make any sense to try and test out things in private if anyone has access to see what you were doing there?
Right.
So yeah. Anything you want to add to that, Joel, before we round off the talk?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's I think it's also important that, especially here in Korea, obviously, as the English casters that we are for the Korean scene, right now we don't have a ton of viewers and not a lot of fan interaction in terms of rooting for their favorite players, favorite teams. It's definitely not there yet, and that's what you're trying to do, Toby, with trying to bridge that gap where you can get a lot more Western interest into the Korean scene. But kind of where it stands right now, the domestic interest is what's keeping this alive, and is what keeping competitive PUBG just on a popular state, because the Korean fans they're very interactive, and they're very involved in communicating with the players, with teams, of what they're wanting, what they're kind of desiring for their favorite teams and players, and saying, we're looking at them, and they're very thorough in terms of putting out that contents live, and the players, what they're doing, what teams, what they're doing, and for the fans to know that. And that's kind of what I think we would very benefit, if we had English viewers as well, for their opinions to come online.
For sure.
For Western people to say that, this is kind of what I want for our favorite players and favorite teams in Korea, especially when they get to internationally, and they're going to be represented against some of their, home teams out there, and sometimes want different things from them. And I think being communicative, being kind of thorough in terms of what you're wanting from them, and for the teams to communicate right back, it's a very healthy interaction, and I think should benefit the teams in the future. So just asking for a lot of interaction and a lot of interest in terms of our Western viewers. I'm sure watching the Toby stream right now, and obviously abroad, where we'll get future people to kind of be interested in the Korea leagues overall. So we're gonna be starting right around October 1st with OGN on the first week and Africa on the second week. We're gonna be rotating that bi-weekly. So be sure to watch Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 p.m. Korean Standard Time for PUBG Korea League Season 2. That's all to start very, very soon, so it should be very exciting.
I'm just gonna Google what time that is in Europe. 6
Hey,
p.m.
sure, go ahead.
Korean time.
It'd
It's 11
6 p.m.
11 a.m. 11 a.m.
11 a.m.
Yeah, so it's noon.
11 a.m.
It's the
That
middle
sounds
of the
about
day.
right.
The middle of the day, you
Yeah,
get to watch competitive PUBG.
Watch
guys.
it on your lunch break.
Exactly, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect time.
Yeah, I wanna tack onto that just a little bit. I really, if you're not watching the Korean or the Asian PUBG scenes, you're possibly missing out on the best players in the world going forward. Absolutely.
There you go.
You need, like, even when I was watching season 1 KL, as time went on, European leagues and this other stuff, I was like, the Korean teams are catching up. The Asian teams are catching up. This is
They
not
always do.
that far behind. I watched their recoil control got better and better. Their decision making got better and better. Their ability to utilize the terrain got better and better. And this could be the region. You will see top level PUBG here in Korea, just with Korean teams.
Throw them a bone and they'll wipe your entire team. That's
there you go.
That's how it is. But with that, boys and girls, I think we're gonna wrap up things. So Joel, any shout outs you want to do? You get like a little minute's time to promote yourself. Tell us what you like to do, and just throw some stuff out there.
Hey man, I'm just trying to get interest for the PUBG here in Korea, and I think it's a little bit underwhelming to say that we only get about, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of viewers for a tournament I feel like should receive thousands easy. So, with this kind of platform that we're having with Toby right now, and with other things that I'll be participating in the future, I'll just kind of be promoting the tournament and promoting OGN and Africa for what they do incredibly well in the Korean production. As we always know, is going to be always on the top of the line. So, just if you're bored and just around lunchtime for EU and just kind of on the earlier evening time for the North Americans, and just be on the lookout, watch the Korean leagues, and I will be guaranteed that over time you will learn to enjoy them.
There you go, guys. And it's, as we said, I mean, one thing is that it's, what can you say? One thing is that it's, but it's guys from another part of the world. These guys, they're most likely better than you and me together at these games. So believe me, they're very, very much enjoyable. And you get to listen to the beautiful voices of Joel and Clint. So what more can you hope for? Paper Thin, toss us your outro and let us know who you are.
Sure. Yeah, man. I'm Paper Thin. I'm the PUBG caster. We'll be opposite of Joel and OGN for the PKL this year, and it's really exciting stuff. I mean, I love Korean esports. I love PUBG, man. I think it's just going to be just a really high-level tournament. There's going to be amazing PUBG action. You're going to see some really smart, like possibly innovative gameplay. We'll see what goes on. But I can't wait. I think we have amazing production value here in Korea, like both at OGN and Africa. We have very awesome studios who have been doing this thing that is esports for a very long time. So they really know what they're doing, and they know how to put on a good show. And I think we have darn good casters here in Korea for English across the board at OGN and at Africa. Big shout out to Max and Ending Life, Atlas, who did PSS and will be doing, I believe, right? Max and Ending Life are back, right?
Yeah, Ending Life and Atlas will be back.
Yeah, they're fantastic. This season, it's going to be mostly me and Rapid. He's a StarCraft 2 primarily broadcaster and StarCraft 1, but he did a really good job at the APL with me. He'll be back here for season 2 at Africa. So we have some really good casters. I think I want everyone to keep spreading the word. Especially, I got to give a shout out to our boy Patrick. He's great. I almost said the F-bomb there. He's that good. I almost used to. This guy loves Korean esports, and he has been so helpful to us, and he is really passionate. We need more people like Patrick out there that are spreading the word and really sharing this thing that is awesome, that is Korean PUBG.
There you have it. And also, I just completely forgot to mention that with the addition of the former League of Legends or Riot Games employee now going to PUBG Corp, that was like, woo! But that's gonna have to wait until until next podcast. I completely forgot about mentioning that. Damn it! That should have been one of the questions.
All right.
But,
Save it,
we'll see how everything pans out, and the next time you guys tag along for our podcast, then maybe we'll have some more to add to the discussion in that sense. But with that, boys and girls, thank you so much for tuning in. For those of you guys on YouTube, thanks for watching. Feel free to subscribe. You see the Twitter handles, and I'm trying to point it. It's so weird when it's up like reversed. Okay, either way, there are Twitter handles underneath both Paperthin and Joel. Jump on there, follow them. They're both amazing guys. So jump on there. Make sure to stay tuned. And as these guys said, even if you're from the States, even if you're from Europe, if you want to be involved in PUBG, you need to be involved in where shit goes down. And guys, we know we're good in the EU. We know they're good over in the States, but they're also darn good in Asia. So with that, thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope all of you have an amazing evening.
Thanks,
Thank you, Toby.